The event is hosted by essDOCs in collaboration with Portall Infosystems and Infosys Finacle. My name is Varun Dinodia, and I am VP of Business Development for essDOCs in the Middle East and Asia. I'll be co-moderating this session alongside Meera Kumar, CMO at Portall Infosystems. The format and agenda of this webinar is a 30-minute panel discussion, followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. Our panelists joining us today are Alex Kulandris from essDOCs, Dhruv Kotak from Portall Infosystems, and Mohua Banerjee from Infosys Finacle. All three panelists bring with them a wealth of knowledge in their respective domains, and it's my pleasure to introduce them to you. Alex is a co-founder and co-CEO of essDOCs and co-chair of the ICC Banking Commission Digitalization Working Group. He hails from the 7th generation of a prominent Greek shipping family, with his earlier background being in maritime law. Alex holds an MBA from Wharton Business School and co-founded essDOCs with one of his MBA classmates in 2005 with the aim of eliminating inefficiencies from paper documentation in shipping and trade. Since then, the company has grown to serve over 51,000 customers across the globe and is growing steadily. Dhruv Kotak, representing Portall Infosystems, is the managing director of the J.M. Bakshi group of companies, of which Portall is a wholly owned company. J.M. Bakshi, as most of you would know, is a leading diversified business group involved in shipping and logistics, boasting a 100+ year history in the maritime space, with customers across 55 countries and offices in over 63 countries across India and the world. Dhruv is a graduate from the INSEAD Institute of Management, and alongside his duties as Managing Director of J.M. Bakshi Group, he is CEO of Portall Infosystems. Portall, under the aegis of the Indian Ports Association, the IPA, launched its modernized port community system PCS 1X in 2018. PCS 1X is now operational and active in 19 ports across India with over 16,000 corporate stakeholders. It is also crucially providing a collaborative platform of value-added services in the form of Picasso, which is a marketplace connected to key vendors and platforms covering shipping documentation, logistics, customs processes, and more. Our third panelist, Mohua Banerjee, represents Infosys Finacle, a part of EdgeVerve Systems, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Infosys. Mohua is a senior director of EdgeVerve Systems and head of blockchain for Infosys Finacle. She brings with her 20 years of related experience and success in software sales and product program management and strategy. Today, she will provide her insights and experience from a banking vendor's perspective, particularly with respect to Finacle Trade Connect, a blockchain-based application developed specifically to address and simplify the trade finance process requirements for banks. Without further ado, I'll set the stage for our panelists by providing a quick introduction on the new normal in trade, which we see as emerging due to COVID-19, and which, as we speak, is reshaping the trade landscape globally and accelerating digitization of trade at previously unseen levels. The pandemic has brought with it very quick, dramatic changes to trade and supply chains around the world, with exporters, policymakers, and financiers working hard to keep trade moving despite demand and supply shocks. The aim of the discussion today will be for us to learn from our panelists their understanding of the present trade landscape in India and across the globe, how they see the digital present and future amid the new normal, and how their respective companies are working together to deliver integrated, interoperable digital trade solutions within India. If you have any questions, please post these in the questions section in your webinar pane, and we'll do our best to address them during the Q&A part of the webcast. You can also access in the handout section PDF files covering solutions from Portall, Infosys, and essDOCs. So let's kick off the panel discussion in the form of a few questions asked to all the panelists, where I'll ask, starting with Mohua from Infosys Finacle. So if you could share with us how you have experienced new normal in your relevant domain. I mean, the challenges, issues, changes observed during the recent trade crisis caused by the pandemic. Mohua?
Thanks, Varun. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be part of this panel and this conversation, a very crucial one in the current situation. So if we look at last year itself, trade was always was something that was in the highlights, because it was always slowing down because of not only before the virus attack itself, because of the geopolitical situation and impact of it on the economic growth of certain countries. The world merchandise trade saw a drop the commercial trade services saw a pickup. So there was a imbalance that was already seen in terms of the trade market itself. And come the pandemic, and it had a severe impact. Now, if you look at the various statistics that WTO and other organizations are publishing, there seems to be prediction that there will be a fall between anywhere between 13 to 32% because of the pandemic, and this will be based on various economic situations and various geographies. If we look at India itself, and comprehend what has been the impact, right, between from April, where there was reported that 70% of the export orders were cancelled, which obviously has a direct impact into the other players in the ecosystem, as well as the financing that has been provided around it, to what it is being reported now that it is about 40%. So within a quarter, we're seeing there's rebound. Now, rebounds are all specific to markets and how each one is getting impacted from an import and export perspective. Now, where we come from, we basically are providing a solution on trade financing itself. And trade financing, if you look at from a bank perspective, is majorly a back office operations, very paper intensive, and which obviously is leading to the fact that the current situation is actually hindering the process of getting paper documentation across to the bank, for them to be able to take that required decision as to how and they provide the lending and the financing capabilities. While a lot of people may look at it as something which is hindering a process, the banks have looked at it in a very different way, and we're working with them to actually support as to how they come across this particular situation. So they are taking up new innovations, taking this as a challenge, and are trying to see as to how do they make their paper intensive processes more automated. They look at fine-tuning their business processes at this point of time, because the recent events also that has come up in Singapore, they're trying to see as to how they can tighten their credit process and bring in more fraud detection. So where the pandemic has impacted the actual business, it is also has helped the banks to push forward their agenda that they should actually get more automation, fine tune, and bring in more ecosystem players into the entire financing process itself, so that a very fair and a trusted decision can be taken for people, that they not only provide lending now, but also to cater to a lot of those segments which were being unfinanced, whether it's an SME or an MSME segment, and bridge the gap from a financing perspective. So I'll share more details in terms of how we're doing that, using our solution and supporting the banks. And that was something that I wanted to start off as a thought, for further discussion.
Sure. Thanks for that overview. Dhruv, you've probably been as close to anyone in India with regard to the trade impact, ports, customs, etc. So if you could shed some light on what the new normal is according to you, and what are the challenges the country is facing.
Yeah, so I think hi, and I think the biggest impact that took place with COVID, I think coming down, I think there were two parts of it. I think, as Mahua mentioned, trade is obviously global in nature, and India is very much a part of the global landscape. So I think we started seeing impacts in terms of trade flows right from the end of January onwards, as certain parts of the Far East were the first to get impacted. So we started seeing trade flows starting to get impacted from January itself. And there was therefore, as we started seeing what was happening in parts of Europe, I think people in India started recognizing that a lockdown is imminent. And I think even prior to the official lockdown, which was announced by our government on the 22nd of March, I think prior to that, a lot of entities started putting in terms of various business continuity practices into place, processes into place. They had a lot of work which was already undertaken in terms of trying to make sure that remote workings were possible. Now, having said that, nevertheless, I think the degree of preparedness was just not up to the mark. I think, the lockdown came to everyone. Still, there were pockets of people who were well prepared, but I think nobody expected it to last as long as it did. And I think Indian lockdown has probably been the longest lockdown, I think, in the world. And it's, we've been in this state for over 4 months now. And unfortunately, I don't think this is ending in a hurry in India. So when I look at the new normal, this 4 months, and I believe it will go on for 6. I think you will end up seeing a lot of behavioral changes, because the longer you go on, and this has been proven, both psychologically and socially in different parts of the world. So if you have a behavior change which is short-lived, which therefore if you're forced in a situation for a shorter duration of time, your behavioral change, you usually go back to reverting back to how your behavior pattern was before. But the longer this lockdown extends, especially in a place like India, you're going to see some very, very dramatic business practice changes. And that's going to actually start from being from an individual level, because they've been in that position. So I actually think that the silver lining of this extended lockdown in India is that you're going to see digital adoption in India. It's already started. And the rate at which you're going to see this digital adoption take off in India is going to be, I think, unparalleled compared to any part of the world. And that's the silver lining of the fact that we are, I would say, one of the most impacted economies in terms of the lockdown, how long we've had to extend it, and I think how long we will keep having to extend it. But I think that will lead to a huge shift. And that shift largely is that I think in India, a lot of the trade, as even Mahua had mentioned, not only linked to banking, but linked to shipping, linked to lines, linked to forwarders. I think across the ecosystem, the entire trade was on the back of huge amount of documentation, physical documentation exchange. And I think what we are seeing now is that there is obviously a huge, first of all, fear in the minds of various stakeholders that, listen, we just can't be having this type of social engagement in this period. But I think it's also leading them to understand that having a strong digital ecosystem in place to ensure documentation exchange is completely online and is paperless and is non, there just cannot be any human interaction. I think that has really taken grip. And we are seeing that there are those companies which are able to provide a complete touchless experience, are really starting to gain in terms of traction. And this was always a vision that we had 5-7 years back, where we believe that as a logistics, as a transportation group, we need to create that interface to capture wallet share and business share. I think today the companies that don't do it aren't going to survive. So and that's simply starting from, I think, a huge behavioral change which is underway in India. And again, I think it's what I say to people from various geographies, technology companies, and otherwise, who are looking at a market which is going to transform, I would say, faster than others. I think in our space, I think India is really going to stand out. It's a combination of change as far as the government is concerned, but each and every individual stakeholder, probably fear, probably change of business practice, probably certain amount of strong changes in laws which are underway, they are happening. You will see the new normal in India already emerging, but will be I think here to stay in the next quarter. And I'm saying it as quick as that, will be probably the most digitized logistics ecosystem probably in the world. So that's the change that I see on the ground.
Great, very interesting. And yeah, it's unfortunate that the crisis has brought this opportunity, but I guess in the long run, it's important for this change to happen. Alex, if you've been talking to people across the world, and how do you see this new normal pan out?
Yeah, well, I mean, so echoing the same problems. Obviously, we have lockdowns. We had, in certain countries, courier companies shut down. So what was happening is, when we're talking about documentary trade, either the bank checkers couldn't get to the documents because they weren't working at the banks, or even if the documentation was arriving at an exporter's office or an importer's office, the people weren't at the office, they were working from home. So we have this dual problem that, on the one hand, documentation really wasn't getting through the financial chain. You then had the secondary problem that this virus is so so virulent and ultimately passes even through physical paperwork. People didn't want to touch paperwork. Paperwork was coming in from certain countries in China, and we heard people saying, I don't want to touch it. They were disinfecting the paperwork. We had other problems with customers where a vessel would turn up at a refinery and one of the crew members was quarantined with COVID. Well, obviously no one on the shore wanted to go on this vessel. So now how do you deal with the paperwork? Because in the energy industry, normally what will happen is as the vessel will load, the paperwork's created shoreside, it's taken onto the vessel, and then the master reviews it and signs it on the vessel. But of course, when you don't want these interactions, you've got a major problem. So what we've seen on the digital side, well, I mean, obviously what we've seen on the ICC side is massive changes. And the ICC spent a lot of time and a lot of work in finding ways to allow the banks to deal with scanned copies on a temporary emergency basis. But that is not sustainable and ultimately has many risks. So the question now is, what is the new normal? The new normal undoubtedly is a lot of people are going to want to remain working from home, or at least have the combination of working from home sometimes, working from the office sometimes. So the concept that we're going to go back to a paper-based system seems to me absolutely, it's simply not going to happen. I think the shift from 2019 to 2020 is that paperless trade has moved from an efficiency operational solution set to a must-have business continuity and potentially even a business resilience solution. And that's a massive change, right? So suddenly my driver isn't cost savings, now my driver is business continuity. And where we're seeing that come through, for example, we have a certificate of origin platform called ESSA. It's the largest in the world. At the beginning of this year, we had about 260 chambers of commerce across 15 countries signed up. We have seen 7 years of growth in the last few months of that platform. New countries, over 70 new chambers in 3 countries. We're getting more countries coming in by the day, have signed up, because how do I sign and stamp certificates of origin if I'm at home? I have to use a digital process. At the same time, what we're seeing is our more advanced digital customers are turning around and saying, this is the only way we want to work. So whether that's on the supply side, whether that's on the purchasing side, literally they're turning to their counterparty saying, Cargo Docs is my business continuity plan. So we had one major miner who came to us and they were looking at our network in China and they said, listen, you're missing 31 of my major buyers. Over 2 months, we approached all of them with them. We signed them up. We onboarded them. Now they're able to be 100% digital into China. They're now doing the same into Korea, and they'll extend that to their other countries like India as well. So we're seeing companies move to digital as a business continuity tool, and we're seeing countries and NGOs start to push this as well. So obviously, and I'll let the others talk about what the Indian government has done, but obviously the Indian government has pushed very hard on accepting digitization. But we've also seen Peru and Oman. Peru and Oman issued decrees saying we have to move to paperless bills of lading. You're seeing bodies like the UN, like the ICC, like the ICPSA, the Ports Association, all these various bodies, BIMCO, pushing for digital trade. And I think we're going to see more and more of these. As lockdowns come back, right, we're seeing Spain going back into lockdown, Hong Kong's talking about catastrophic community spreading happening or being on the verge of that. The US is, you know, a mess to say the very least. I imagine we're going to see more governments pushing for digital trade as a solution for business continuity.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks everyone. So moving on to the next question, which I guess most of the attendees would want to know, why are the 3 of you together here on this webinar together, and why now? So what has changed today, and where are we towards developing a trade finance ecosystem in India? I mean, in the interest of time, I would request each of you to speak for around 2 minutes on this one. So if you could, Alex, start with telling us about the partnerships and why Portall, Finacle, and essDOCs working together is so important.
So fundamentally, trade is incredibly complicated. There's so many elements to it. There's so many different parts to trade. It is far too complex for any single entity to digitize all of it. which therefore to us means that digital trade is a team sport, and you need to partner with best of breed companies who can help you build out the ecosystems, build out the capabilities. So obviously we're working with Finacle to access and leverage the brilliant digital financial platform they're building for all the Indian banks, because obviously you can't do import-export business without Indian banks. We're working with Portall to deal with the great work they've done on digitizing the customs clearance process with their PCS, but also the ecosystems they have of corporates on the import and export side. So ultimately, by working together as a group, we are able to deliver far more capability and a far more powerful ecosystem, certainly than essDOCs could by itself.
Sure. Moa, your thoughts on the partnership?
So extending to what Alex just said, right? Given that it is understood and accepted that digitization of trade is picking up pace in India, supported by the Indian Banking Association, which sent out a circular encouraging banks to adopt the norm of moving paperless. We, as a platform which provides a multi-party system, we felt that it was very important that we look at in terms of ecosystem players, where we could facilitate not only the digital record creation on the platform for the trade finance transactions, but also expedite and help the banks in terms of bringing in ecosystem players who are leading in this particular space of providing other supporting documents and in a digitized format, so that they are able to look at the entire trade finance process end to end, right from origination to settlement. So that was our main objective of being partners with essDOCs and looking at Portall as the extended arm.
Sure. Dhruv, your thoughts, please.
To be honest with you, not so much more to add. With what Alex and Moa said, I think they covered it beautifully. I think the only point I would probably add is that trade being global, you need to bring in practices which are both global and local in nature. Both other partners are global in exposure. They also have Infosys and Finacle have tremendous local domain expertise in terms of banking and trade finance. And I think somewhere down the line, it's the ability to try and bring all of this together and cater to the specific Indian importer exporter, their needs. And I think that's what we bring to the table. So I think it's a phenomenal combination of local and global international cooperation, which will actually be able to deliver this through a digital medium. So yeah, I think that's the only thing I can add.
Thanks, Dhruv. So I'll move on to my next key discussion item, starting with Alex. How are each of you accelerating digital trade in India and across the globe? So by this, I would mean, please tell us a bit more about the key projects you're working on to digitize trade in India and globally. Alex?
Best to come off mute. So obviously, we opened our office in India, in Calcutta, a few months ago now. Obviously, these two partnerships are incredibly critical to our approach to India. But one of the big things that we're looking at doing, we've been working with various Indian companies for a long time. So Reliance has been a customer of ours for over 5 years, Tata for a couple of, for at least 2 years. And so we're either taking the work we've done with our ecosystem that's outside of India, that's Indian companies, and bringing it into India, or our multinational corporations like Vale, BHP, Cargill, Bunge, who all deal extensively in India. So we're taking our EBL network, which is the largest in the world, outside of India, and connecting that through Portall, through Finacle, to the local ecosystems and the local traders and banks. Essentially, is the work we've been doing, and we're seeing some massive levels of interest. I think I've been incredibly amazed actually by the speed with which the Indian market is picking up its focus and its trials into digitized trade, and it's incredibly exciting to see.
Sure. Dhruv, if you could talk us through with some changes happening and some key projects as far as digitization is concerned at your end.
So I think for us, we're a logistics and a maritime company to start with, but I think digitization has been sort of a core strategic focus for us. For the last, I would say, decade. I think the first thing that we noticed was that, and I think Alex will be able to, I think, identify what I'm saying. When you look at tram shipping and shipping on a global basis, it's a very fragmented industry. So, I mean, if I just leave the container industry, which is not so fragmented, but if I look at the tanker and the bulker and the, all other segments, very fragmented industry. And then when you spread it out in terms of the different participants in that ecosystem, they are so diverse and so fragmented that, a lot of the network efficiencies are lost. So, I think first things we started looking at a decade back was port call management. We understood, because of our backgrounds as being ship agents, we looked at digitization of port calls. We looked at charter parties very carefully. We've digitized charter parties. We've digitized the way lay time solutions are worked on. We've looked at things like, global vendor management. We've created, third-party solutions for, ship agency on cloud services, which, empower ship agents all over the world. We're giving them access to technology which other people don't have. So this is some of the stuff which we've done on a global level, and we believe there's a lot more work that needs to be done because shipping consists, continuously is more and more fragmented. There are more and more players coming in it, and the rules keep, even though we talk about a lot of standardization of rules, it still ends up being a very, very diverse, broad space. In India, our digitization journey, and contributing to the nation's digitization journey began 5 years back. And again, as everyone else has put it, for us it was the port community system, which was first off the block. We're working now closely with the government to develop a national logistics platform, broad base the offering from the port ecosystem and go more towards importers and exporters. And that's why, again, partnerships with Alex and Moa and their entities are so important for us, because we need to make sure that we broaden who all we are inviting and who all are there as a part of this ecosystem. Because again, the more participants that are there and the more data that is exchanged, will efficiency improve. So I think in addition to that, I think one of the tools which we are working on through our Picasso initiative in Portall is to try and create a platform where you achieve two things. One is you try and create end-to-end visibility for any importer or any exporter, immaterial whether he is a paying user or not. I think our first objective is that every importer and exporter should have a end-to-end visibility for his, for his entire supply chain in India when he's dealing with any form of EXIM trade. The second step is to try and bring in some phenomenal partners and various service providers who are today providing these different services in silos, and try and bring them onto this platform. And we've already started this in Picasso to try and make sure that the best digital solutions, which we believe exist, they exist in India, they exist in different parts of the world. We believe that they are in silos today. And as Alex mentioned earlier, our job is to make sure that we get as many people to work together, because there are, there is quality in a lot of silos today, and you need to bring them together and make sure that the end users are able to access these great digital tools and solutions. So I think that's another project for us, the Picasso project, which is extremely critical in addition to the NLP. But for us, the digital piece in what we're doing for India, we believe is as critical as building ports, building additional terminals, building rail lines, which is what we're doing on the hard physical area. We believe setting up the digital ecosystem is actually setting up the core infrastructure for our country going forward. If we are able to contribute, and it's such a vast sort of space and plane that for me to actually tell you what would be the number of projects that we have and that we're chasing in India would I'd take up the whole webinar myself. But I think but realistically, I think all of us here are playing the role of setting up that digital infrastructure that India and various Indian companies, various stakeholders are going to build on and use, for the I would say for not only the distant future but for a long time to come. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we're up to.
Great.
Your comments on building digital or solving the problems of digital island are enormous, because obviously if I digitize and I end up with 20 systems and they all have the data, in separate silos, that's a major problem. It's something the ICC is looking at very closely. And the other thing that you made me think of is people don't necessarily understand how fragmented this market is. So if we think about the dry bulk market only, there's 9,000 dry bulk ships over 10,000 deadweight tons in the world. The average fleet size is less than 5.
Maybe I'll give, sorry, Mo, before you start, and you would love this statistic because you're in the banking space. Would you like to know what is the global payments market in shipping, pure shipping? It's a couple of $1 trillion is the payments market. So when you look at any of the big, large payment players in the world, and again, it's very fragmented. So the solutions when you're dealing with, primary currencies, secondary currencies, tertiary, and then exotics. So if you just look at payments as a space and the fragmentation that you have in terms of payments and vendors, I'm just adding in terms of what Alex says, the kind of benefits that you're going to see in terms of stronger visibility and the savings and the predictive tools that could be made available with collaboration is just tremendous. So yeah, agreed, Alex, completely. Sorry, Moa, I think.
No, Dhruv, that was, I think, very useful for people who are on the webinar to understand the gravity of the, the problem that people are dealing, especially in the trade. From a banker's perspective, I think if we look at, what the challenges, if you look at every bank, there's a unilateral or a, bilateral relationship that they have. So if you put it that way, as a buyer and a buyer bank is connected, a seller bank is connected, right? So for us, the first objective was to bring as to bare bone, how do we bring all the 4 parties onto a single platform where they're able to see the data that is being exchanged, conquer to it, and how quickly can a decision be made on a bare simple transactions itself, from open accounts to starting with very complex letter of credit processes, etc. So for us, it was to bring in a platform where member banks and their end customers are able to collaborate and benefit from the increase in adoption of digitized processes. So one was to give them a digital platform. Second was as to how they can actually exchange documents on the platform itself. Given that ICC has been, and Indian Banking Association is supporting from a market perspective, and ICC from a global perspective is basically asking banks to start accepting, and various other parties to look at even scanned documents as a legal document in the current situation. So with that, the platform is actually helping them to use it as a document exchange platform. They can come into the platform and validate and try avoiding fraud situations, which has been very, in different markets. Now and then you keep seeing that banks are hit with a huge loss because of being given faulty documents and facing double invoicing cases. So it's basically a platform which is being meant to be used not just by banks, but also how a bank can help the entire ecosystem by providing it's the right financing information also. So from a India market perspective, we've been working with most of our leading customers, and also with who are not Infosys or a Finacle customer. So we've been facilitating, and we brought a lot of banks together. We've worked with them. I think it is potentially going to become the first bankers-led consortium, which is coming into India, which potentially will handle 86% of the trade financing of the market. With and it's a combination of so people who used to compete are now cooperating and are looking at from the end benefit of a customer perspective. So they're not just seeing that are they losing out business, because they're only looking at how they can collaborate and they can ensure that they don't deal with more situations of fraud and leakage in financing, right? So this is basically a consortium which is going to lead first with trade financing, and then look at other areas which are required, and blockchain is basically a technology which can help this to be achieved. We also, just to the point that Dhruv mentioned about payments, we also realized that the banks were dealing with digital silos ecosystem. So we also are bringing in a capability with our partnership with one of the leading payment providers in the world as an alternate payment rail for cross-border payments, which can basically help them not only to look at payments, but also from a settlement process perspective, and also help banks to look at better liquidity management and consolidation of nostro relationships. So in net effect, how do they not only provide financing, but also look at their own internal processes from a payment capability perspective? So overall, as Dhruv and Alex mentioned, India is, as always, when we look at the kind of innovations we've done in the space of payment, I think as a trade ecosystem, we are also looking at changing a lot of things that can become a norm which globally people will follow. Given that as people believe that if you are able to do something in a market as complex as India, with the diversifications, with the different regulations, the states that we have, something is successful here, it is something that can be followed as a role model in many other places, if not a direct replication. So that's what we believe.
Sure. Thank you, Moa. Thanks everyone for your responses, and that leaves us with around 10 minutes for a Q&A session. So I'll hand over to Meera to take over the Q&A.
Thanks, Varun. Hi, everyone. I'm Meera Kumar, CMO at Portall. I'll wrap up the session with the panel discussion and also move into the Q&A very shortly. I can see there's some really interesting questions already posed, and we hope we can get through it in the remaining 10 odd minutes. But if not, please be assured we will answer the questions via email or on a one-to-one basis post the webinar. From my side, I would like to thank the panelists for some really good insights, and of course, all of you are attendees for sparing your time today to join us. Hopefully, all of you who joined will leave here knowing a little bit more about the Indian digital trade landscape and also about the work the three companies here are trying to do together. Also pleased to see a good engagement, and if anybody else has questions, please use the questions tab on the webinar panel to add questions. Let me dig into what's already here. The first question, Alex, is to you, Alex from essDOCs. The question is, when will I be able to use Cargo Docs to connect to Finacle and Portall?
So we've started the interfacing work with Finacle already, and we're going to kick off with Portall very, very shortly. So this actually shouldn't take too long. So we're already planning the first pilots with both. So the idea is to be able to really have the connectivity by the end of the summer.
Thanks, Alex. So since I represent Portall, let me add a sentence there for you. I think within the next couple of weeks, Cargo Docs would be visible on Picasso. So that's for those who want to start using. The next question looks like it's for all the panelists. So I'll start with Dhruv. The question is, what are the next steps? How do I register to Picasso, and how can I get started?
I think I think Picasso, first of all, is completely integrated with the Indian port community system. So there are two ways to doing it. One is that if you're already a registered user within the Indian port community system, it's you have a direct KYC created for you within Picasso itself. But then the other route is obviously through the overall Portall. The Portall domain, you can reach out and fill up a very, very basic KYC functionality. If you just want to go and experiment and see what type of solutions and options and different products are available to you, you can go and test them there. You can go and view them there. It's extremely easy for existing users, but even for someone who is not a PCS native, I think to be able to, and we've already seen that, we've seen that with a number of B2B and industrial users, their their ability to get onto the Picasso platform and start engaging with different service providers and try and get a solution done is extremely easy. So I think it's, I mean, sorry, I sound very cliched, but it's literally a click away. So it's not difficult at all.
Thank you, Dhruv. Alex, from your side, would you like to add what would be the next steps for cargo docs as well as for essDOC perhaps in India?
Sure. So on either solution, actually, you can either go directly or obviously via our partner. So if you're a chamber of commerce or you're a corporate, you can either come to us directly or you can go via Picasso. If you're a bank, you can come to us directly or you can go via Finacle. In each case, what we're going to do is collect some legal entity information, some user information. For the EBL side, you'll need to sign our legal agreement that everyone signs, and for everyone else, we'll set you up. And setting everyone up and having them trained is something that can happen in a few hours, in a day, as our banks take a little bit longer. But ultimately, the registration and the approach can be direct or indirect, and it's very quick.
Thank you, Alex. Mahua, I think the question applies for you as well. How would banks go about registering and getting started with Finacle Trade Connect?
The most simple way, so the banks or the corporates can reach out to their banks to be able to register onto our sandbox environment first. It's a simple 2-day process from signing access agreements to us creating the nodes for the banks to be able to facilitate the transactions for the corporates. For banks, they reach out to us, we enable them on sandbox, and then we work with them on the journey for an end-to-end integration and testing of the solution itself. The best part of the solution is that it doesn't need a Finacle solution in the backend. It is agnostic, so it works with any kind of PLTs that the banks are using, or with any kind of core or trade system that they're using in the backend. So it is agnostic to the back office systems.
Thank you, Mahua. The next question I can see is specific to EBLs, so I'll address this to Alex. Alex, the question is, which geographies and markets are EBLs in use? And this is a separate question, but it's related. Can you please explain the legality of EBLs? Can I use them in India now? Over to you, Alex.
So you can use cargo docs EBLs in 81 countries and counting. We cover most of the major markets: energy, chemicals, agri, metals, minerals, paper, all the way through to non-commodity FMCGs, for example. The bill of lading legality is governed by a multi-party user agreement that everyone signs that recreates the rights and obligations of paper bills. That agreement has been essentially blessed by the P&I clubs that ensure that ship owners remain within the P&I cover, and it's been reviewed by every law firm in the UK. It's governed by UK law. So it's now been signed by many of the largest companies in the world, many of the largest banks, many of the largest trading companies in all these different industries as well.
Thank you. The next question is regarding costs. Mahua, I think it's relevant to all three companies, so would you please start? What are the costs to implement your solutions? This is a question.
So the cost to implement the solution depends upon the size of the bank and the trade finance volumes that they're dealing with. We work closely with the banks to understand how they want to take up the journey on the digitization part of it and movement of their trade finance processing on the blockchain itself. So we work in different models. We work in revenue sharing model as well as in SaaS model. So the pricing gets defined based on how the adoption of the banks of the solution.
Right, thank you. Dhruv, would you also like to comment on the costs for the Portall Picasso solution?
Sure. So before I begin with Picasso, I think first of all, the PCS itself, and I don't know how it works in other countries, but in India, it's free. the Indian government has made sure that this is a price that the Ministry of Shipping has spent to build this, and it's a utility piece of infrastructure utility which is for free for all stakeholders, which I think is a tremendous thing. There's not even a usage fee or a transaction fee which is there. So that's number one. Number two, as far as Picasso is concerned, it's largely it's a free subscription model. And when I say free subscription, there are two pieces of it. The free part is, as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to make sure that there is complete transparency for the entire supply chain for importers and exporters, and I think that's something that they can get on Picasso through the end-to-end track solution. The second part is that you have a number of great solution providers that we are bringing together and curating for you. Obviously, they all have spent a lot of money to try and build those different solutions and to offer those solutions to industry. So that obviously comes at a price. And the third piece of it is that if there is something which, again, where companies need to really customize the end-to-end visibility and have it linked and integrated with their ERPs. So obviously there will be certain API work which would be required to be done, which would be customized and required for each of the large enterprises who want this. That's a different challenge altogether. But the mission really is first and foremost to make sure that every Indian exporter and importer has a complete end-to-end visibility. And we start with that, make sure that that's absolutely free, and then we build on a whole bunch of offerings along with that.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting. Alex, I request you to comment on indicative costs for cargo docs and possibly also essDOCs if you can.
Yeah. So cargo docs is a pay-as-you-go model. So there's a fee for the exporter, $50 for a set of bulk documents. So this would be the bill of lading and all the sporting documents. 50, that was 15 for a set of containerized documents. There's also a fee to the exporter bank. That's normally a flat fee, and it's free for everyone else. So ship agents, inspectors, issuing banks, importers, entirely free to them. Similar to Picasso, if you have major customization or major interfaces, there might be one-off fees at the front end, but that's literally one-off. essDOCs essentially is charged to the Chamber of Commerce, so it will be embedded into the fee that you pay the Chamber of Commerce. Fundamentally, essDOCs really is a platform for the chambers that allows exporters and freight forwarders to apply for the certificate of origin, for the chamber then to manage those applications, to charge for those applications, whether that customer wants to pay by credit card, pay by invoice. We essentially become the ERP system of the chamber. And let them manage all of that. So with essDOCs, the certificate of origin business, the fees essentially embedded in what the chamber will charge the exporter or freight forwarder.
Thank you, Alex. We do have a few questions. Varun, if you're running out of time, you could tell me where to stop, but I'm trying to squeeze a couple more in. Alex, this question is also to you, and after that I can see one from Mahua. The question is, how secure are e-bills of lading, and have you had issues previously?
So our EBOL platform, so cargo docs basically has the same security level and infrastructure security is bank grade. So it's the same levels of security as you'd have for an online bank. Just to put people's minds at risk or at ease of these risks, we get audited by 20 to 30 banks every year. So many of our banks come back and redo IT audits of us, check our processes, our security, all our standards. We also do an annual audit ourselves that we share with all our customers. So I think we're probably one of the most audited IT platforms in the world. With respect to issues, glad to say we've never had any security breaches or any security issues at all.
Thank you. That's good to know. Mohua,
I think we sorry, Meera, we have time for one more question.
All right.
Just one more question.
So I had one for Dhruv and one for Mohua. Dhruv, with your permission, I'll give it to the lady.
Please.
Yeah. Mohua, the attendee asks, other than global banks, do you think nationalized banks will also be needed for digital documentation in India? And how does Finacle help with this?
Oh, absolutely. So the consortium that's coming up in India has the largest 2 public sector banks as a part of it, because they, with their presence globally as subsidiary network, play a very key role in the trade financing system in Indian market. The largest 2 are part of the consortium, and they are also, taking up the required measures to look at end-to-end digitization of the trade finance operations. All the 3 levels: front office, mid office, and back office. So very much, and they are actively involved, is what I will say.
Thank you, Mahua. There are several other questions on interesting topics of interoperability and speed, but we will have to address them one-to-one. We're out of time. Thank you all once again for joining us and for posting the questions. We will respond to the others that have not been taken up now. You will receive an email, I understand, in an hour or so with a link to this webcast and also more information. Please also download the brochures of the 3 companies. The product brochures are on your screen. You could download that and carry that back to colleagues. Thank you all, and thanks for attending. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.